Chapter 8. A Mysterious Ally. The old library annex was a forgotten corner of Lunaris, tucked behind ivy-covered walls and surrounded by the hushed whispers of time. Ava slipped inside, her boots crunching against the scattered leaves that had found their way through the broken doorframe. The air was musty, thick, with the scent of aged parchment and dust. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with books and scrolls that had been untouched for decades. She moved carefully, her fingers brushing over the spines of the tomes. Many of them were marked with symbols she couldn't read, their faded titles written in a language she didn't recognize. The tome she carried pulsed faintly in her bag, as though responding to the presence of its forgotten kin. "Why did Xander send me here?" Ava muttered to herself. The instructions had been vague: find the annex, and someone would find her. But so far, the only company she had was silence. As she stepped further into the room, the faint sound of movement made her freeze. She spun, her hand instinctively reaching for the tome. The shadows near the far end of the annex shifted, and a figure emerged from the darkness. "You're braver than I expected," the man said, his voice calm and even. He stepped into the pale light filtering through a cracked window, revealing a face both sharp and enigmatic. His green eyes gleamed like emeralds, their intensity cutting through the gloom. "Seth," Ava said, the name falling from her lips before she could stop herself. He inclined his head slightly. "I'm honored my reputation precedes me." She tightened her grip on the tome. "Xander warned me about you. He said you're not to be trusted." Seth's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. "I'm sure he did. Xander's loyalty is admirable, if somewhat rigid." He took a step closer, his movements measured and unthreatening. "But I'm not here to harm you, Ava. In fact, I'm here to help." "Help me how?" Ava asked, her voice wary. Seth gestured to the tome in her hands. "You've felt it, haven't you? The whispers, the pull. That book is more than just an artifact. It's alive, and it's connected to the prophecy in ways you don't yet understand, but I do." Ava's stomach churned. She had felt it, the whispers that seemed to call to her in moments of quiet, the weight of the tome like a heartbeat in her hands. "What do you know about the prophecy?" Seth's expression darkened. "I know that the silver wolf is meant to bring balance, but balance doesn't come without sacrifice. The darkness isn't just an enemy, it's a force that feeds on fear and division. If you're going to fight it, you need to understand what you're up against." Ava hesitated. There was a sincerity in his tone that she hadn't expected, but it was layered with something else, a weight he wasn't revealing. "Why should I trust you?" "Because," Seth said, his voice softening, "you don't have a choice. The Council will try to control you, Xander will try to protect you, but neither of them can prepare you for what's coming. I can." Ava stared at him, her mind racing. She wanted to believe him, to accept the guidance he was offering, but doubt gnawed at her. "What's your stake in this? Why do you care?" Seth's gaze flickered, a brief shadow crossing his face. "Because my family has carried the burden of the Guardian's Oath for generations. My purpose is to protect the Silver Wolf, even if it costs me everything." Before Ava could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from the entrance. She turned to see Xander stepping into the annex, his golden eyes narrowing as they landed on Seth. "What are you doing here?" Xander demanded, his voice a low growl. He positioned himself between Ava and Seth, his stance tense and protective. "Relax, Xander," Seth said smoothly. "I was just explaining a few truths to Ava, truths you've been keeping from her." "And what would you know about truth?" Xander snapped. "You've spent your life in the shadows, manipulating everyone around you." "And yet here I am, offering the answers she needs," Seth shot back, his calm demeanor cracking slightly. "You can't shield her forever, Xander. The darkness isn't something she can run from." "Enough," Ava's voice rang out, silencing them both. She stepped between the two men, her silver gaze sharp. "I don't need either of you to fight over me. If you have answers, then give them to me. Otherwise, stop wasting my time." Seth's expression softened, and he nodded. "Fair enough." He reached into his coat and pulled out a scroll, its edges frayed and its surface marked with the same glyphs as the tome. "This is part of the prophecy. It speaks of a choice you'll have to make, a sacrifice that will determine the fate of the realm." Ava hesitated, then took the scroll. The glyphs glowed faintly under her touch, sending a chill down her spine. She unrolled it, her heart pounding as the words began to form in her mind. "The light cannot shine without shadow. The wolf cannot survive without sacrifice. When the time comes, the heart must guide the hand, for only then will balance be restored." The scroll fell silent, its meaning sinking into Ava's thoughts. She looked up at Seth, then at Xander. Both men watched her, their expressions unreadable. "What does it mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It means," Seth said quietly, "you'll have to make a choice, and it won't be an easy one." The weight of his words settled over her like a shroud. Ava folded the scroll and slipped it into her bag, her mind spinning with questions and fears she couldn't yet voice. "We'll figure it out," Xander said, his voice steady. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring. "You're not alone in this." Ava nodded, though the unease in her chest didn't abate. She glanced back at Seth, who was already fading into the shadows, his presence as fleeting as the whisper of a breeze. "I hope you're right," she murmured, more to herself than to Xander. The path ahead was dark and uncertain, and the choices she would face felt impossibly heavy. But for now she had no choice but to keep moving forward.